1. I watched a film that reminded me of what I went through, so thought to share it. It still bothers me, but as time goes on, it's getting better. When I first started dating my now husband a few years ago, we would meet up after he finished work, and he would bring his bike and lock it up as he lived a few miles away from me and the next town where I lived and where he worked. He biked a few miles a day. We would also meet up with friends sometimes. After, we would walk to his bike, and he would walk me to a taxi, and I would wave goodbye as it's driving off. I lived a few miles from the nearest town myself. My husband lived a few more miles out. He would then bike home. Never once thought to check if the taxi man had ID or the face matched the picture. To check the company actually exists. I just trusted it was the real thing. I do constantly check these things now and ring up to make sure the person actually works there. Sounds paranoid, but here is why. I got in the taxi just like every other time. The taxi driver seemed quiet, but I just assumed he was either tired from a long shift or a bit shy. Being a bit shy myself, I thought I understood. I did the usual and told him where I lived. To get to my parents' house I was living at this point, you have to go down a very long road and street about a mile long. Then you have 2 turnings. If you miss one, it doesn't matter. You just drive up a bit more and you get to the second turning. The taxi man missed the first turning. I thought he must have daydreamed whilst driving or just didn't know the area very well. Back then I did a lot of giving people the benefit of the doubt and being overly naive and nice. I told him, but he kept on driving. Fear did kick in, and I actually shouted, "You're going to miss the second turning too," as he was still driving. He wasn't saying a word at this point. I remember grabbing my phone to ring the police, and he slammed the brakes on, causing my phone to slip out of my hand and land on the floor near my feet. He reversed backwards without checking if any other car was behind us, and was about to go down the second turning. I quickly said, "Here is fine," as I had a bad feeling and didn't want him to know where I was living. He finally spoke and said, "Sorry about that, I'm tired. Been a long night." I felt bad for shouting and doubting this man at this point. But after the second turning, if you don't go down it, it leads to a countryside and nothing for a few miles. So I was scared he was heading that way. I said don't worry, gave him my money, and then said keep the change, as I felt bad for him being tired. He said thank you and smiled and put his hand in my leg and said, "You know you're a very pretty girl." And with that I quickly smiled awkwardly and said good night. I didn't manage to get 1 foot out the door when he grabbed my right arm, and I felt funny on my right side, which hurt. I managed to pull myself back up and try to get out. Some of it is a blur, but I remember him pulling and I could feel pain on my arms. I managed to get 1 foot out the door when he yanked me by my hair and I could feel pain on my back. I managed to wriggle free and I left everything in the car. It was a case of run, Forrest, run, and I ran home as fast as I could. Luckily, it was just around the corner. I remember running up the stairs and ringing my boyfriend, now husband, and then it just went black. I passed out. I woke up the next day in my own bed. My boyfriend stopped over on the sofa and my mom and dad let him. He informed them what happened. They let me sleep for a bit. When I did wake up, I had scratch marks and blood all over my arms and back from the taxi driver. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the arsehole bit me too, on my arm. I ran upstairs to feel safe and I blacked out from the shock. I rang all around the taxi services and even the police the next day. I gave the company name and nobody heard of it. I gave the description of what he looked like. I then thought, has anyone else in our hometown had this bad experience? So I went on Facebook and asked around, and to my shock, lots of girls that I actually knew said they had an encounter with him. One said he was acting shady and showing off, so she didn't go in. Another got out when he complained about her sitting in the back seat and not the front. The police said he must have got scared and backed out of the plan, or so I was about to use my phone when we went past the second turning, but got the courage to do it again. My boyfriend went back to the area where I ran from and all my stuff was laid out on the path. Obviously, he didn't want evidence in his car. Police were keeping a lookout for him, but nothing ever came of it. Until a few years later, he was caught. Me and my husband were watching the news and he got arrested. One woman rang the police and they got him on so many attacks and attempts. I do wish I managed to get a good swinging punch in his face, but glad he was caught and hope he's learned his lesson. Taxi driver from hell. Let's not meet. 2. I live in Massachusetts, in a populated city, so I mostly rely on public transportation to get to places. This included the subway, and living here nearly all my life, I have many stories regarding the subway, such as a guy sitting next to me and touching himself, a woman punching me in the face, and the story I'm going to tell today. Me and most of my friends would rely on public transportation to get ourselves to school. This happened in our sophomore year. Our high school was placed smack dab in the middle of the city and around some colleges. I had a friend who would go home with me every day, and we both used the subway. Living in a populated area, I was aware of the potential creeps and dangerous people. It was around 5 p.m. during wintertime, and it was quickly getting dark. After our club was finished, me and my friend began our journey to the subway station. This included walking through a college campus and many streets. It was usually less than a 15-minute walk to the station, so we would just talk and mind our business and things surrounding us. Halfway through our walk, I had a feeling that someone was behind us, which wasn't surprising since it could have been other students and this was a heavily populated place. Me and my friend were slow walkers, so I was basically waiting for this person to pass us like others would. Although I waited for a long time and still felt this person on our tail. When we got to a crosswalk, they were still behind us. So quickly and slightly, I turned around to take a peek at them. My heart started beating faster when I glanced at them. At first, I thought they were wearing a ski mask, but I was mistaken. They wore a black beanie and a black scarf tightly wrapped around their mouth and nose. He was about 50 years old or older, had a dark green windbreaker on, along with baggy black pants. What irked me a little bit was how close he was to me and my friend now. He was just less than 5 feet away, and I was terrified that I was going to accidentally smack him with my Jansport backpack, which I've always had stuffed with textbooks and whatnot. Me and my friend crossed the road, and as we continued to walk, I became more and more weary. He was a lot closer now than before the walk, and he wore heavy Timberland boots that would crush and pound against the salt on the snow. As a girl, I've always felt insecure about my body, and I was just terrified for me and my friend, since this man could see the back of both of us, most likely eyeing our bodies. Note, both of us are 14 years old and super passive, so confronting this person was the last thing I wanted to do. I saw that my friend would glance at her phone every now and then, and go on it to respond to texts, so I ended up texting her. "Man behind us, creepy. It's been 10 minutes. She replies, "I noticed. I don't know what to do." Since we were on a college campus, there were often large tours given by people and crowds of tourists. We began walking at a faster pace, and I heard his footsteps quicken as well. I leaned in and whispered to her to walk through the crowd and take an immediate right on a different path that we'd never take to the station. It just led to a different gate exiting the college, and outside of the gate we'd be about 50 feet away from the subway station. So we did exactly that and walked through the crowd of about 40 to 50 tourists by a popular statue. Afterwards, we were speed-walking by this point, and I looked behind me to check whether he was still behind us, and luckily he wasn't. We proceeded to walk down the stairs towards the station, still shaken by what happened. We paid to get through the gates, and then we got on the platform of the train that would take us home. There was a certain exit I'd like to take to the station. I would get off to go home. So we walked further up to the left side of the platform with more benches. We found an empty bench somehow amidst the large crowd at the platform. It was Friday after all, and almost 6 p.m. I sat on the right and my friend sat on the left. Not even 30 seconds after we sat down, I felt a presence standing right next to me at the bench. It was him. I saw the Timbs. Not only that, he was just facing me, heavily breathing, and most likely staring down entirely. As I saw his shoes pointed at me and baggy black pants stuffed within his boots, I was terrified and nudged my friend as she was on her phone. She was still holding her phone but froze and didn't continue to click on anything. Just as we were in our frozen trance, the announcement started to play stating that the train was arriving. We both shot up as the train began to come, and I took her arm, proceeding to lead her to the right side of the platform and through the crowd. We stood in front of the doors of a train cart along with many others. I looked to my right, and there he was, in front of another train door to our right. Each train cart came with 3 pairs of doors that would automatically open and close. We chose the middle door, and I thought it was odd that he was at the right door instead of following us in. Then I thought that he would probably isolate himself and follow us off the train cart at our stop. I looked up at the train board to see that another train was going to come in 2 minutes, and as the train doors opened, people began to spill out. We waited for everyone to shuffle out, and the group at his doorway had already shuffled out, so he was in the cart already. I still held my friend's arm and made us go to the cart last, standing in front of the doors. There were less people on the train, but all of the seats were taken, or there were 1 or 2 left, empty per row. I could see him on the right side of the cart staring at us as he stood by a metal pole. The train would make a warning noise that would be about 3 beeps. This indicated that the doors would close. These beeps were half seconds. At the first beep, I instantly yanked me and my friend out of the cart and back on the platform. The doors quickly closed and I sighed in relief. The train started moving within 5 seconds, but within those 5 seconds, horrifyingly enough, the man sprinted up to those closed doors which had 2 transparent windows and stared down me and my friend. We backed up immediately. He still had the beanie and the scarf on, but all I could see were his menacing eyes. Then he proceeded to bang on the glass, making us both jump. But it was shortly cut off as the train cart was pulling away. Still looking at him banging on the glass as the train moved into the tunnel, my friend fell to the floor and started crying. There weren't many people on the platform since everyone boarded the train. I began to console her and tear up as well. We were both young and oblivious to everything. I helped her up, and we got on the next train and sat down, blankly staring out of the windows across from us which showed the dark subway tunnels in motion. Afterwards we were near our homes and parted ways. We never told anyone about this, although we should have, thinking back to it all. I met up with the same friend a couple days ago, and we were reminded of this event. Overall, I'm glad that we were both safe and out of harm's way in that moment. But I just felt so stupid knowing that I could have gotten someone's attention since we were near big crowds, or possibly a security guard. So, man who followed me and my friend from our high school to the subway platform, let's not meet again. 3. If nothing else, I hope this story helps someone step out of their comfort zone and end a situation before it begins. I was not as affirmative as I should have been due to this occurring in a business setting, and it created a situation I'm still dealing with. Please learn from my mistakes. I own a small business. The weekend before Thanksgiving, I was a vendor at a local market. I was set up next to a father and daughter woodworking duo. The father told me what the relationship was, and that he made the items and that she hand-painted them. I had never met either of these people before, and they were new to the market. It was a 4-day market, and the vendors are all really friendly. Just after settling in on day 1, the father of the duo took up talking to me, with the friendliness of the vendors in mind, the fact that I was similar in age to his daughter, him being 20+ years older than me, and him telling me lots of dad jokes and old guy jokes. It didn't strike me as weird. Maybe had I not been there in a business capacity, trying to work with customers and focus on what I was doing, I would have caught the signs that he was going to be an issue before it got too far. I would have shut him down from the get-go, but I did not. And he would not stop talking to me. I do not say this lightly. When I didn't have customers, he would talk and talk non-stop. He kept asking me personal questions which I avoided like the plague. I tried to work on making some items while we were slow, turning away from him and trying to deter him from talking to me, but it didn't stop him. No amount of ignoring him or mm-hms turned him away. If he was in the middle of saying something and a customer came to my table, he would interrupt or talk over the customer, or even over me talking to the customer. He would come over, stand in front of my table, and block customers from physically being able to get to it, and he'd talk. He stepped in front of customers to talk. He also tried moving my product around because he has OCD, and my colors need to be organized better. I organize my table by product, not by color, or nobody would find anything because everything would be all over the place. He was chasing off my customers and bordering on the line of creepy. I kept my customer service voice and asked him to go back to his table, to please stop talking and allow me to work, to not touch my stuff, etc. He did not let up. I should have been ruder to him, but I was so concerned about customers hearing me speak curtly to someone, because they don't know what's going on, and I would end up sounding like the ignorant one. I act much differently when representing my business than I do when dealing with this sort of thing on my own. He eventually took to asking me if I was single. I didn't really answer him one way or another because I wasn't thinking clearly. I kept trying to ignore him. That's all I could think about. I tried to talk to his daughter a little bit, who seemed perfectly lovely, but he wouldn't let me without interrupting. The one thing that I did not see him do during the entire 4 days we were there was actually talk to one of his own customers or help them. He completely ignored his daughter, his own table, everything. Now that I look back on it, it was a somewhat obsessive behavior, but again, I was wrapped up in trying to handle my business and didn't catch it. By the first day, I was drained. I came in early on the second day specifically so I could rearrange myself. My chair had previously been on the side of the table closest to his, with my bags for customers and my work bag on the other side. I moved everything between his chair and mine and moved my chair as far away from him as I possibly could, without going out from behind my table. It did nothing to stop the situation. It may have actually made it worse because now he just talked louder. By the middle of day 2, I was fervently texting and trying to find someone to come fill in for me, as he continually asked me how I was texting, as if it were his business. Being the weekend before Thanksgiving, I was unsuccessful. Feeling like I had no choice, I went to talk to the event organizers in hopes that someone may not have shown up, and there was an empty table somewhere that I could move to. They told me there were no empty tables. I professionally told them what was going on, and that he was impeding my sales, being inappropriate and bothering me, hoping for a solution. They could not do anything. He and his daughter had paid for their table, which I fully understood. I wasn't expecting them to be removed, but was hoping something could be done to stop this. It got bad enough that I made sure they weren't renewing their table for the Mother's Day event before I renewed mine. If he and his daughter were going to renew, I was either not going to come or asked to be moved when renewing my table, as you get the same table when you renew otherwise. I made it through all 4 days by ignoring him as much as I could. However, as I was trying to pack up, he came over to my table and kept standing in my way. I go to get a crate. He'd see me move toward it and stand in front of it. I go to put something away, rinse and repeat. I had enough. The event was closed. The organizers were aware of the situation, and I lost some of my nice. I flat out told him to go back to his table, help his own daughter, go away, and leave me alone. He seemed to take the hint. I packed up in record time, throwing things in boxes just to get away from him, and left before he changed his mind. I thought that was the end of it. But we wouldn't be here if it was. I was home for about an hour when I got a message on my business Instagram from him that started with, "I hope you don't mind, but I got your information off your business card." There's one major red flag with this. I keep my business cards under my booth where I sit, so I can put them in bags and hand them out accordingly. I never gave him one. I never would have. The only way he got one was to go behind my table and take one while I was in the bathroom. It went from being completely annoying and somewhat inappropriate to creepy straight away. He then proceeded to go on a multi-paragraph rant about how he has no friends, and knew immediately we were going to be best friends. He also told me there was an obvious spark between us, and he couldn't believe he found his best friend and soulmate. He wanted to know when he could take me out on a date after all the sexual tension over the last 4 days. I was floored. I did everything I could over those 4 days, short of telling him to shut up and go back to whatever level of Dante's Inferno that he came from. And this is what he took out of it? I flat out told him that I was not interested. I did not feel the same way or enjoy talking to him over the weekend, and he was not to message me or attempt contact with me again, or he would be immediately blocked. Long story short, I gave him the same spiel multiple times, and had to block him on Instagram, ban him on my business Facebook page, and block him through my business email. Thank goodness I don't put personal information like my name and phone number on my cards. Now he's taking up bothering me on Etsy, the last possible place he can. I told him the same thing and sent his messages to spam, but he seemed to figure out that he can continue to message me on Etsy and I can't block him. He is still messaging me. And even though they're all going to spam, I finally had to report him to Etsy Trust and Safety. I hope the resolution is that they will block him. He is causing me panic attacks, and I'd really like to move on from this. Him not taking the hint no matter what I said or did made me afraid that he could find me on social media somehow, since he knew my first name, the rough area I lived, and what I looked like. Since he had a very unusual name, I found him on every social media site I could, and preemptively blocked him just to keep myself safe. I did find one very important thing while doing so. When I went to block him on Facebook, his entire profile was public, and he liked to post about every single thing he did. I took a moment to scroll his feed simply to try and get a feel for if I felt he could be violent or not. With one very quick scroll, I found out that almost everything he had told me was a lie. For one, the girl he was with wasn't even his daughter, and he wasn't involved in the business in any way. Granted, he was the one who told me that, and she wasn't around when he said it, so she probably had no idea I thought this. And that's probably why he wouldn't let me talk to her without interrupting. She was his niece, and she and her husband made the items. He was helping her in her husband's place. I've kept screen caps of his messages, and also the things on Facebook that contradict them in case. God forbid I need them to file a police report. I've already chatted with my friend's friend, who is a local police officer. The laws in our area are really for the stalkers, and we have a high rate of deaths here at the hand of stalkers because of it. I was told that because he used my business information, which is public regardless of how he got it, I could not do anything. I had to wait until he moved into my personal accounts to file charges. I'm currently working to find out if there's loopholes to that, because what he's doing cannot be okay. It feels so strange that it could be legal for him to continue to harass me even after being told not to, just because it's a business page. I've also gotten a P.O. box for my business a few times over in case he has a friend order something from my shop in an attempt to get my address. I was very forward in my last message with him prior to reporting him, that any personal contact or any contact in general would be considered harassment. I am going back to the next market. I am worried about him showing up to it or any other events, because I do have a website that lists my events so that my customers know where to find me. I have kept every correspondence with him and every message where I've told him no. I have screen caps in my phone in case that fails. I typically only do larger events that have a police presence, and if he approaches me at an event, I fully intend to take those messages to one of the officers and show them that I've told him multiple times to leave me alone, and the last time I told him exactly why I wanted left alone, and what he was doing that was inappropriate, so I had a written record. I'm hoping if the police see him show up in person to an event I'm at, and he proceeds to talk to me after he's been told not to, that it will be considered stalking. I'm also working on getting a large male friend of mine to come to my events and help me out. I'm hoping this all ends here, and that he will end up disliking me and decide he deserves better than me and I'm not worth his time. But I worry he'll try to find me or retaliate. I don't know what's going to happen, so I've documented accordingly. So, fake woodworking vendor guy, let's not meet again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories. Episode... how'd that minute go? 463. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. The weather is angry today. I was going to venture out, but windy and... well, it's not raining yet, but I guarantee it will be later. So I decided to be practical and use the couple hours I'd spend going out and doing shopping. Then the hour or so I'd spend vegetating on the sofa to rest afterwards. And just order an online shop, which I've not actually done for a very long time. I did it through Prime this time because they have, in the UK, they do groceries through one of the local supermarkets. And I've never tried quite doing it that way. So I ordered basically a week's food through them. And I have it getting delivered, so that means while I'm waiting on that coming, I can use that 3 hours I just mentioned there to work and it's been quite productive. I've got one video recorded already, so yay me, well done. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.